Putin arrested Strelkov for extremism. Why now? Who is Girkin, aka Strelkov? This is what we're gonna talk about today, and this is a footage from the courtroom. And we're gonna discuss who Strelkov is. It would be kind of like summary of my playlist about him. And you will know more about him today and kind of condensed in one place. And also we will discuss what the situation in Russia is and how come that in Russia finally real extremist arrested for inciting extremism. Finally. Usually Russia arresting only innocent people using this article of the law. And now this time they find a guilty one. Good one, finally. It's just me being sarcastic, but you will find out why in a few minutes. Hi, I'm Elena. This is my political channel Enough of Propaganda. Welcome to my channel. This is also the first shot of Strelkov after he was detained. And what a very, very rare video that actual criminal in Russia is in court. This is extremely rare. Two FSB officers are kind of guarding Strelkov and lawyers talking to him before the court, Koroleva and Blokov. One of the reasons why Strelkov was arrested is his highly active criticism of Putin and Russian army and Russia in general. But be aware that Strelkov isn't a good guy, and I'll prove it to you in a few minutes. But in general, he is not opposing the war in Ukraine. On the contrary, he is just thinking Russia should fight more effectively and kill more Ukrainians faster and better. That's what he wants. He kind of mix of Russian imperialist and pro-USSR kind of person. He is a blogger. He is a former FSB officer who is guilty of helping Russia to seize Crimea and territories in Ukraine, creating the war in Ukraine and unrest and war. This is who he is. He murdered people, he tortured people, he personally signed death warrants for people, include his own basically subordinates. We will talk about it today as well. But this post saying, I'll try to translate it to you closely because it's a bit difficult. He using a lot of Russian inside kind of jokes, which many people wouldn't understand. That's why I'm trying to translate it more understandable for English audience, English-speaking audience. History has no subjunctive mood. For 23 years, a nobody, a schmuck, was at the head of the country, and he managed to throw dust in the eyes of significant part of the population. Now he's the last island of legitimacy and stability of the state. I wouldn't agree with that, personally, but that's what Strelkov said. Remove him and Putin, illegally means successfully completing the work of those who seated this unique advantage, how he called Putin again, on the throne in the past. So basically, Putin getting power illegally and removing him illegally, that would be a logical conclusion. That's my explanation. Continue the quote. But the country cannot stand this cowardly mediocrity in power for another 6 years, wrote Strelkov. So he calling Putin a cowardly mediocrity. Basically, coward nobody. What Putin could do, in opinion of Strelkov, it's to provide transfer of power to somebody smart. A really good guy or something. But Strelkov is saying that Putin wouldn't even think about it. And even if he would, the people Putin surround himself with are just useless nobodies, and this is not gonna happen. Putin is a weak nobody. Strelkov is right about that. And that's why I am on occasion quote Strelkov myself, even he's a war criminal and a really bad guy. But sometimes he's telling the truth, as much as Prigozhin sometimes telling the truth, and I also quoted Prigozhin as well, which both of them are low-life criminals, war criminals, and the bad guys, and they are placed in jail. But sometimes they telling the truth, and even Strelkov created a so-called club of the angry patriots. That's how they understand patriotism. Patriots is who wants Russia to be the bad guy, the empire. There is no such a thing as a good empire. None, zero. All the empires were bad. They was squashing people, they was taking freedom from people, taking money, taking land, taking life from people of other countries, and even their own country. And so was Russia. But that's what Strelkov kind of want for Russia. But in general, in my opinion, which I will prove to you also, Strelkov is in it for himself. All he wanted is to be a little czar, like Putin, where he can punish people, he can reward people, he can execute people, and he did. Let's talk about that. I don't wish him luck. He is guilty. He deserves to be arrested. I only wish he will be detained in as bad conditions as Navalny or every innocent person in Russia who is right now detained and tortured in Russian jails. On my channel, in the tab playlists, I have a whole playlist about Girkin-Strelkov. And you're welcome to watch these videos. If you're watching my channel for a while, you already know that Strelkov basically the one who pulled the trigger of the war in Ukraine in 2014. It's proven fact that he's a FSB officer, and he was acting FSB officer at the time when Russia invaded Crimea. I have the whole playlist about Crimea, and Girkin-Strelkov played the key role. And in these videos you will see all about it. Also, he is found guilty of downing flight MH17 in Hague, in the court. And basically, if he will get caught, he will face a life sentence. He should have listened to me, I guess. I told in one of my videos that he should give himself up to the International Criminal Court, because it would be way better than being in Russian jail if he will be alive still. Because not many Russian citizens, bandits, who came to Ukraine with Russian passports from Russian territory, with Russian weapons, and with Russian army, not many of those commanders of the time still alive. Givi, Motorola, many others were murdered by Russia, and Strelkov, aware of that, he even told about it openly, that Russian citizens who created unrest in the war in Ukraine, which led to Russian annexation, illegal annexation of Crimea and two territories on Donbass, at the time so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and many of them were killed, eliminated by Russia. Strelkov survived. Well, I'm not so sure for how long now. This footage is from Maxim Kat's channel. Strelkov in the past is professional military man who was in many conflicts which Russia was involved. 2 Chechen wars, Bosnia, Transnistria, and many other places. And Ukraine, of course. Crimea and Donbass. He was the one with the troops of Russian Federation who was taking over parliament in Crimea and forcing the deputies to vote for the necessity of referendum in Crimea. After Crimea, he and troops moved to Donbass. He and some bandits and so on. And so this is who Strelkov is. This footage is also from the times when Strelkov was in Ukraine, in Crimea and in Donbass. He and his bandits and the Russian army, these are the guys who started the war in Ukraine and who created all of this. This is what Girkin has to say personally. This journalist is asking question of Mr. Girkin-Strelkov.
Вам следующие слова, которым вы охарактеризовали как конфликт на Украине. Спусковой крючок войны все-таки нажал я. Если бы наш отряд не перешел границу, в итоге все бы кончилось как в Харькове, как в Одессе. Было бы несколько десятков убитых, обожженных, арестованных. На этом бы и кончилось.
Это мои слова,
Ваши.
я их сказал про Ханову еще в 2014 году, да. И в принципе в них содержится правда. Я говорил то, что считаю правдой.
This is the article Strelkov is talking about, and the journalist. It's called "Who Are You, Shooter?" Basically these words.
Действительно, если бы наш отряд не пришел на Донбасс и не стал бы ядром сопротивления, ядром русской весны на Донбассе, то, скорее всего, без этого ядра русская весна была бы подавлена в зародыше.
What else he said?
Я не увидел, к сожалению, никакой поддержки органов государственной власти в Симферополе, где я конкретно находился. Не увидел. Не было ее. Депутатов собирали ополченцы, чтобы загнать их в зал, чтобы они приняли. Чего ж там говорить-то? Да, я был одним из командиров этих ополченцев. Я это все видел изнутри, собственными глазами.
So nothing was happening in Donbass. Nothing was happening in Crimea. And Strelkov is right. He and the Russian army and Russian Federation started that conflicts and started the war. If it wouldn't be for him, for Russian army and Russian bandits with Russian passports, everything will be like in Kharkov, which was prosperous and wonderful city, and not like it is in so-called DNR or DPR or LPR and so on. And nobody would have been down in the MH17 flight, which 298 people died and so on because of Strelkov. Nothing would have been happening because nothing was happening there. There is whole Wikipedia page about Igor Girkin-Strelkov, his pseudonym. And it's talking about his activities in different wars in Crimea, in Ukraine, in Slavyansk, and so on. And in 2014, security services of Ukraine opened criminal proceedings against Girkin-Strelkov for his actions in Slavyansk and in Crimea. There is a whole video of mine about Bucha massacre. And before Bucha, the same thing was happening in Slavyansk in 2014. And Girkin-Strelkov was guilty about that. We will see the piece of that video a little later. And practically, presence of Girkin-Strelkov in Donbass, as SBU is right about that, is a proof of Russian involvement. Russia trying to put mediocre people in between, either Wagner or this and that, pretended it isn't Russia, but then Putin himself admitted that Wagner was financed completely from Russian budget. It means it's a Russian company. It is Russia. And so was Girkin-Strelkov and his bandits. He was FSB officer who was traveling with passports issued by FSB on the fake names. And so was Platnitsky, the leader of Lugansk People Republic, so-called. And also I published in my videos intercepted telephone conversations between Strelkov and his handlers from Moscow, and so on. Even Russia denied interference in Crimea, then denying interference in outside of Crimea. Russia lied back then. Russia is lying about this now. And Russian Defense Minister Shoigu coordinated all of Girkin's actions. That is true. And many, many things came directly from Putin. Only Putin could give order to give the buke for separatists, so-called separatists led by Girkin-Strelkov, by Strelkov himself asking to give them that buke, which downed the flight MH17s and so on. Lots of involvements of Strelkov in kidnapping and murder. Torture and murder of Ukrainian politician, for example, Vladimir Rybak, and many other people. There is a couple of villages in Chechnya, some places in Dagestan and so on, when they were basically killed the whole villages. Many people just disappeared and they never was found. Some of them were found dead. Girkin-Strelkov was, at the time, in 2014 and so on, he was a Minister of Defense of so-called Donetsk People Republic. And this is the document you see with his signature as Colonel Strelkov about execution of Pichko Alexei Borisovich. And I'll show you a little bit more of this in a minute. Basically, Strelkov executed his own people for being marauderers, and the guy stole like t-shirt and a pants. Yet he was executed, according to the order of Strelkov himself. This is the video of Vice News when these documents were found for the first time. The journalists found it, and that's what filming Mr. Ostrovsky.
Interesting things and strange things is that they were tried under a 1941 Stalin-era law. They committed crimes punishable by death, which was, in this case, looting. One man stole 2 shirts and a pair of pants. The others stole some personal possessions and kidnapped a man and held him in the basement.
Girkin-Strelkov, the commander of the rebels, he
Strelkov
personally signed off on these death warrants.
Strelkov signed off on all of these death warrants, yes.
So these are the proofs and facts that Strelkov is guilty in war crimes, and he decided that he is some sort of a little Napoleon or something, that he is a czar of some sort, that he can decide the life and death of people. I watched these documents and I showed you this article and investigation by Radio Liberty, the executioners of Slavyansk. And here those rooms where they found those documents in Slavyansk. I told you about it before, but this is one of the death sentence orders, which said as justification for the executions, Girkin-Strelkov cites a June 1941 wartime decree handed down by the Presidium of Supreme Soviet of the USSR. So he using the document of 1941 to execute people in 2014 in Slavyansk. The order state that executions have been carried out, so he killed these people. Girkin warns that any grave crimes committed in the war zone will be punished decisively and without mercy. Girkin signs off the execution order under his nom de guerre Strelkov. It's his pseudonym. You're welcome to read this article as well as watching the video itself. And this is what we need to know about Strelkov himself. This is the video where I'm talking about it more closely. It's called Bounty for Russian Terrorist Igor Girkin-Strelkov Wanted. And there is a link to this article as well. So if you like to read it yourself, you're welcome to. So Strelkov is guilty in many things. War crimes, torture, kidnapping of people, murdering people, creating the war in neighboring country, and lots of other things. He started as a war reenactment guy who was pretending to be a white officer of white army and so on. And he claims to be that he's for Russian Empire and all the nobility of Russian army. He doesn't have morals, he doesn't have nobility, he doesn't have honor in any way. He's just a murderer and killer, like majority of Russian bad guys, kind of like Putin. He doesn't have more morals than Prigozhin, yet he distinguished himself from Prigozhin. And the attack on Strelkov started from his meeting in this kind of like a library. Not a library, it's a like little ultra-right bookstore called Listva, or like Leaves. And one of his lecture was some authorities and police came and they tried to look for a explosive or something like that and make people leave the building, except for the this particular store is an apartment building. But they didn't evacuate the whole apartment building. If there would be a real threat of explosives, they would be evacuate the whole building. But they only evacuated people in the store. So they kind of sent him a message, the authorities, that he should bite his tongue and didn't say too much about stuff. But nevertheless, it didn't work out, so eventually Strelkov got arrested, as you can see. I wouldn't make too much out of it. Even there are nowadays a whole bunch of speculations that in one of his posts, he has big following on Telegram, by the way, and he kind of insulted Alina Kabaeva, Putin's lover, and saying that if Putin would have been a woman, like he wouldn't be a czar, he would be a tsaritsa or a queen. Even if the queen would be dumb one, she might have men, excuse me, favorites, if you know what the favorite mean, like Catherine the Great has lots of favorites, the men lovers who was playing a big political role in Russia at the time, and in some other countries, some favorites of the kings or queens doing something important for the country. So he's implying if Putin would be a woman and he has a male favorite who would have been smart and do something good for Russia, then it would be better. But Elena Kabaeva, Putin's lover and favorite, basically mother of his children, she didn't do anything important for Russia. That's what he was implying. And some people saying, oh, Putin couldn't forgive insult to his woman. Nothing of the kind, period. It has nothing to do with any of this, because anybody who knew Putin personally, and former FSB officer Gudkov, or a Putin speechwriter Abbas Galyamov, or anything, Putin care only about Putin. And these are insults on Putin, that is true. But why now? Why now attack Strelkov? Strelkov said a lot of things and insult a lot of people in the past. It's all connected to the mutiny of Prigozhin. Prigozhin and Strelkov has different interesting relationship. They attacked each other for a while, and Prigozhin was writing letters trying to implicate Strelkov in the past. And Strelkov isn't happy. He also published a lot of stuff about Prigozhin, saying that despite the mutiny, despite the Prigozhin basically almost overthrow Putin, didn't even almost get to Moscow. He only didn't make 200 kilometers to Moscow. Yet Prigozhin is forgiven, his money and gold and everything returned to him, and he is perfectly fine. And even meeting with Putin personally in Kremlin. The whole of it, from Strelkov perspective, is just a Strelkov being whiny piece of nobody, who is complaining that how dare Putin meet with Prigozhin and never meet with me. He even said that. Putin never meet with me. It's again me, me, me. And all what Strelkov done in Ukraine, and with all the Donbass and everything, many people could say he believe in that Novorossiya, or how they call it, New Russia, or the new territories in Ukraine, which in Strelkov's opinion supposed to belong to Russia. No. He partly was fulfilling the duties of FSB officer and doing what he was told. Partly he probably believed in it, but in a way he saw the opportunity to create his own little kingdom and become a little czar. And he became a minister of defense of so-called Donetsk People's Republic. And he proclaimed himself supreme commander of the all military forces in those areas at the time. And in his opinion, he did so much for Russia. And what happened? He was just dismissed like a pawn from the chessboard by Putin, by Russian oligarchs. He was nobody, as much nobody as Prigozhin. Prigozhin did his duty, he's dismissed now. Strelkov did his duty, he's dismissed now. And since that time, Strelkov never forget that. He wanted that power back. He wanted to be a part of a Russian Duma or something like that. He wanted power for himself. That is why he was doing all of this and criticizing the Russian army and Putin, implying that I would be better choice. I am smarter. I did so much stuff in Ukraine, and if Russian army would have supported me, if I would have support of Prigozhin, all the money and tanks and planes and everything, I would have grabbed the whole Ukraine or whole big chunk of Ukraine and so on, because I'm so much smarter, so much better. But in general, he's the same lowlife and only care about himself. He is not a hero in any way, and he is not in opposition to Putin. He is not against the war in Ukraine. No, he's just thinking he would be better. And he wouldn't. Because as I proved you, he's the same lowlife who torturing people, killing people, executing his own people, and people who is on his way. Brutally murdering. So he would not be better than Putin. And he deserved to be in jail, but not under false accusations. He deserves to be in international court for the crimes he actually committed. And he committed plenty for that. That is why Igor Strelkov is not a good guy. No, neither is Prigozhin. All of them, include Putin and Shoigu and Gerasimov, and everybody who is supporting this war and doing as much for this war as done Girkin-Strelkov, deserve to be in jail in International Criminal Court. Period. And why Strelkov is in jail now? It's because of the mutiny of Prigozhin. Because before, Putin was okay tolerating people like Strelkov, because Strelkov and his supporters are supporting war, and they were supporting Putin. That is why Putin needs them, and now arresting Strelkov is a big mistake, because Putin basically discouraging his most faithful supporters right now. And some of them came into the court, even protesting and demanding Strelkov's release and stuff like that. So it's plain stupid to do. But now Putin is scared and paranoid, because the people who has power, who has some sort of a military training, who has some sort of a weapons, which many of them are Strelkov supporters, they are dangerous. And Prigozhin with his mutiny just proved it. He just showed everybody that they could basically go to Moscow. And Strelkov personally invited people to do just so. He said Prigozhin showed everybody the way. So we have to, anybody, you're welcome to try. That's why Putin now is paranoid and scared, and he cannot tolerate anymore anything saying against the government, anything saying against that stupidity of Putin, pointing out stupidity of his army, pointing out stupidity of Shoigu or Gerasimov. He cannot tolerate it anymore. It's too dangerous in his opinion. He already saw what can happen. That is why it doesn't matter what Strelkov said. It doesn't matter what kind of post he wrote. It's not connected to any of this. It's all connected to Putin and his fear. Putin is weak. He knows that. He proved it to everybody during the Prigozhin's rebellion. And now Strelkov, Girkin, caught in this mess. He is now paying for the Prigozhin's crimes, basically. And for his long tongue. For his discrediting Putin and Russian army. Well, good one. In the end, I want to add that Strelkov will detained until September 18th, and he will not be released under house arrest or anything, as he claims that he has problems with heart and this and that. But it wasn't stopping him when he wanted to go to fight the war in Ukraine, and it seems like he went there, but nobody seen him much in Ukraine except for one picture in some sort of a bunker somewhere. So for that, his heart is just perfectly fine to fight the war. But to be in jail, oh no, he's so sick. And nobody care about Navalny or about Skachelenko or about other Russian innocent people who ended up in jail and who get tortured there. Their medication get taken away from them. They're not getting medical treatment. One of them gluten intolerant and so on. Nobody care. But oh, Strelkov, yeah, he has heart conditions. Yeah, right. So I personally not feel sorry for him in any way. I think he deserves way more than that. He deserves to be treated like Navalny, like everybody else. Like Russian innocent people who ended up in jail. That's what he deserves. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.